Welcome to My Boulevard Podcast, where we talk about everyday issues from a biblical and balanced perspective. I'm Dhati Lewis, and this season we're diving into fighting for the faith in today's culture, navigating deconstruction and reconstruction, and featuring the voices of poets, pastors, practitioners, and polymaths. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy today's episode. What's up, everyone? This is always great to be with my wonderful, wonderful bride. Today, we are just going to give you a peer into kind of this idea of marriage and ministries. Today, we're specifically going to talk about how do we balance marriage and ministry. And I think it's an important topic. And here's the thing. Let me just go ahead and give you the disclaimer right now. What I've learned, we are filming this in the month of October, and oftentimes in October, you got to recognize that the fall season, September, October, and early November is when Christians, all across North America have decided that this is when we do all of our conference seasons, right? So all of our ministries, all of our conferences, all of our board meetings, all of that happens in these months. And so what that means is someone like myself, I am constantly on the road. So this has been a season of a lot of traveling and a lot of not balancing ministry and family. So we're going to come at this from two perspectives. One, of how we are currently feeling.
What ought to be.
Yeah, what ought to be. And what actually is, because right now, what we're going to be talking about is probably not what is actual. It is what we hope and what we wish, and when we're healthy, what it will be. But because of you Christian leaders, I'm going to be like Adam right now, because of the woman you gave me, or the ministry responsibility you gave me, we are currently not balancing this tension. So that's kind of where we are. And what's your perspective on just how, like, as you think about our questions and what we're going to be talking about today, like, what's your perspective? What would be your disclaimer?
My disclaimer for the moment, or?
This disclaimer for whoever's listening right now.
Yeah, you're not going to get it perfectly. It's an art, not a science, would be my disclaimer. Yeah. Keep trying different things till we find something that works.
Yes. All right. Well, that is good. So this is ready. We're ready to get into this. So, all right. So let me just kind of kick it off, right? Because oftentimes you hear people talk about, right, my marriage is my first ministry, and my kids are my first ministry, and my wife, we talk about like first ministry, second ministry, third ministry. But we're talking about this idea of the tension. The question we talked about is like, how do you balance ministry and family? But I like to not use the word balance, because just like we talked about at the open, there's never really balance. But what is the healthy, appropriate amount of tension that you create between marriage and ministry? And I think, we got biblical reference to this when Paul talks about the superiority of singleness. He says it's better for you to stay single, because like he was, because you only got to focus in on serving the Lord. But if you are not blessed to be able to be like him and you need to be married, then it is good for you to do that. And so, but he says, but you're just going to have tension ultimately. And so let's talk about that tension. What would you just say as some of the ways that ministry and marriage, or ministry and family specifically, has tension? So we're going to go beyond just simply marriage, but we're going to talk about family life.
Yeah. Some of the ways that there's tension. I think you can never be fully focused on two things. Just what Paul's saying. But either the ministry is going to get the best hours of your day, the energy, the creativity, the things like that, or your family is. And maybe there's different seasons for when each one gets, like now it's marriage or family, and now it's going to be ministry. But it's very, very difficult to do those simultaneously. So I'd say that's a struggle, because it's like a juggling act. You have to keep working on that.
Yeah. And you talk about a juggling act, but it also seems like, and maybe you can just shed light on all the dads that are out there, or even all the parents that are traveling, right? If the mom travels or if the dad travels, that why does it seem like everything
Everybody gets sick when you're
falls
out of town.
apart
Yes.
when the spouse is out of town? Like, is there something that happens
I think
there?
the enemy knows. I'm kind of tongue in cheek, but I also I really do think that's true. I don't know, but every time you go out of town, it's like whoever's gonna get sick gets sick. Whoever's gonna have an attitude is gonna have an attitude. Whoever's gonna, whatever dirt's gonna be done is gonna be done, and it oftentimes leaves me as the one like single parenting something, juggling something that would have been much easier had there been two of us, or the routine is out of whack,
Yeah. And maybe that's just, you're giving people the benefit of the doubt and you're blaming the enemy. I think the kids actually know.
Yeah.
And there's like they're weaker in defense. This is the weak line of the
She's
defense
vulnerable.
at this right now. They doesn't have the backup, and I'm going to aggressively get whatever. I think that's really more of it right there. But I don't know.
I don't think they purposely get sick though, because when they were small, that was like the thing. I'm taking so and so to the hospital because they whatever.
Yeah.
You remember those seasons?
I do remember that.
Yeah.
I do remember those seasons. So, but the bottom line is it does. So that's another tension, right? So that's another tension that we have. What are some other tensions when you just think about some of the tensions of balancing or the tension between ministry and family life?
Yeah, when you asked that earlier, I thought about when Chip Dodd was talking to us about how to balance.
Right, but that's not getting to the solutions yet.
But it's the tension too.
Okay. All right, we'll talk about it.
Okay, so oftentimes whatever's like on your plate, the thing that you care so deeply about, whatever it is, this conference or this cohort or a sermon, whatever it is, you have the posture, and it can be me too, like when it's my turn to have that thing, but you have the posture that like you will give it all. Like, what time is it right now? Like 3:00, and you haven't eaten lunch because you just keep going. And you can do that in yourself as an individual. You can choose to do that, and you can choose to kind of die to self or forget self or that type of thing, because ministry is taking precedence, because people's needs are really, really big, and there's things that have to happen, and they have to happen right now, right? That's just kind of the tyranny of the urgent seems to always be true in ministry. But the struggle is when you have a family. I'm just imagining like a husband and wife holding hands, and the husband is willing to sacrifice, but he's holding the hand of the wife. He's also telling her, we're about to sacrifice. And it's not a decision that she got a chance, or I would get a chance to contemplate and make that decision. Oftentimes I'm just the recipient of we're sacrificing. Okay. Oh, we're not eating. Okay. Oh, we're giving more. Okay. Like just kind of that, but it's decisions that you make that if you were single, if you were an individual, it would just affect you. And ministry has that immediacy type thing. Like oftentimes there's not a moment or there's not time for the spouse, or in this case for me, to sit down and be like, would I come to that same conclusion? Would I give up my Friday to come help these people that need help or do whatever? Right. And the answer
No, I think that's really good. And so what I hear you saying is, when you're in ministry and family, the individual is never making a decision that is done in isolation or in a vacuum, but it's going to impact the other family members, right? It's going to impact not just you, but others. So even if you're willing to sacrifice, you have also deemed that necessary for your wife. So that's just an inherent tension there. Yeah, I think that's a very, that's spot on, right? All right. Any other just tensions as you think about marriage and family, just the inherent tensions that we may have?
I thought of another. I think another tension, and I don't know if this is even something we want to talk about today, but I think anytime you're in ministry, eyes are on you. And so for the family, I know that's been a struggle, or that's been a tension, where people are like, well, for me as a wife, there's times I'm like, I can't share that because everybody knows who I'm talking about, like which kid I'm talking about, or I can't just say my husband and I are like everybody. You're a public platform. You have a public platform. You're a public figure. So it makes doing ministry, being in leadership, and having family. I'd say for the kids' perspective, everybody seems like they have told me before that they feel like everybody seems like, or feels like they have the position to speak into their lives without having been given permission to do so necessarily, and maybe held to a higher standard than others have been. And then from a marriage standpoint, gosh, it just feels like you can't really have a bad day. You can't be off. And so that could lead to performance.
It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and that kind of dovetails into what I think is one of the things that we talked about, or that we oftentimes talk about, is the idea of ministry, like calls or whatever. Just because I'm called to something, does that mean you're called to something? Or just because you're called to something, does that mean I'm called to something? And just being able to wrestle with that tension that oftentimes marriages have. And, we've been doing planning couples and serving people who have been planning churches and doing ministries. And oftentimes what I see is the tension of one feeling like this calling and the other not feeling the calling. And then the other feeling like if I don't support, or if I'm not equally as called, then I'm withholding and the person from the call. So that the issue of calling, and then even the side, like this person, my spouse, is holding me back from doing what God has called me to do. And then there's guilt and all that's going on. And so, and so usually I see the differing. So it's just like one spouse is called to something and the other one says, I just support that spouse. To one spouse is called to something and then was like, yeah, I'm called, but I do something else and I'm helping and I'm supporting them. Then the other ones is like, no, we're both equally involved in completely different ways. Which one of those three would you say you are, and what are some of the unique challenges to that?
Which one would you say I am? Because I identified with all three.
Well, you can't be all three because it's all about levels of thing. Or you may be. You just got to explain how you can be all three of them.
So I do know that you have a calling on your life, and I know that I have not been called to the same thing. Like, I don't have the same passion, burden, like, not that you have, right? But I do now because you have it,
right? If
that makes sense.
And you oftentimes have said, like, you're not the type of person who just sits in a room and just dream up dreams and visions and burdens, but like you love to help people or help something that you really believe in.
Right.
So I think to some degree, that's what you're describing.
Yes. So yes, I think there's that, which would be more of the one that was like, you have a calling and I'm a support. I feel like that's more of my posture probably within the church. Now I think I have a calling on my life, and I'm doing something unique from what you're doing, and you don't do what I'm doing, and I'm not doing what you're doing. And I think I walk in that lane too, like with counseling, with even, I was going to say parenting, but we do that together.
Yeah.
But I do think I have a deeper passion for some of the discipleship within, I don't know.
And talk about that a little bit, because I know, like, for instance, counseling, or, right now we even talked about, hey, do I go into financial planning, or like we've talked about a variety of different things. Talk about like how the Lord has specifically spoken to you, because I know there's oftentimes, especially I see over and over again, mothers, and it's not necessarily your case because you've always been involved, but I've seen mothers specifically who has given their lives to raising their children, and then they let their children get in their teenage years, and towards the end of their teenage years, it's like, Mom, I don't necessarily need you in the same way that I need you then. And then they're trying to find themselves in what they're like. So talk about like that journey for you, and the tension of ministry, and how you kind of discern, because you ended up getting a master's in counseling in that journey.
Yeah, I did. Well, I had a flashback to like Hope Hill in the as you were saying that, because I don't think, and then you mentioned the financial planning. I feel like the call in my life is more of a support call, but both supporting you and what it is that God has called you to, but also I'm more of like the jack of all trades. I can figure out a bunch of stuff. And so where's the big need? And then I'll get in and turn chaos into some sort of order.
Yeah.
Right. So,
and I think that, and I just think it's really important to recognize that it wasn't because you're not a person who didn't have options. I mean, you were valedictorian of your school. You were summa cum laude. I mean, like all of the things, all of the accolades. You were in the Air Force. So it's not like it was like one of those things that like I didn't have any option but to, to do those things. It's just like, but you went through a process of choosing and us choosing, and it's also been something that we've always said, like at any time you may feel like, hey, I feel gravitated or called to this, but so just kind of talk about that, like, yeah, just that.
I think that is true. Like, and thanks for saying it, but that is true. Like, I could have done other things, but I think the journey is like, Lord, where am I needed? Where can I fit in? And I think that has been like my Hope Hill story. Like, there's a need here, and I'm good at this, so I'm gonna come in and do that, right? When we found ourselves with 6 out of the 8 of us needing counseling, like, okay, I'm gonna figure out I need these tools for myself, and other people are gonna need this. Like, that was more the posture,
Yeah.
like the desire for those things.
Because I think in a lot of ways you are blessed, and I tell you this all the time, but you are blessed to have the ability that whatever you get into, you're going to make it better. You're going to bless it. It's going to be a benefit because of your leadership, because of your your surrender to the Holy Spirit, because of your desire to just your natural God-given talents and gifts and all of those things that you kind of bring to it. So I do think that there is that uniqueness that you have, and what that has done is you always kind of find the mission, like the overall mission, like raising the best children that we have, but we're putting them in public schools. So why don't I go and become the community liaison at the school, and you became that, and you end up taking the school into new heights. And then it's like, oh man, we need like financial management. Well, why don't I become a bookkeeper? Oh, we need counseling. Why don't I become? So it's like have that ability, right, to just kind of find the overall mission that God has us on, and then kind of create it. Now you're like the Airbnb manager. You've created, you business starter, owner, like all of these things that oftentimes the world don't recognize because they just put them in the kind of the category of side hustle. But it's like all those things that take place, that whether it's supporting the ministry, it's directly involved in the ministry and all of that. So that's kind of your story. So I would love to kind of say, what advice would you give to someone that's similar to you? But then I also would like to say, like, what would you give advice to someone who's just like, no, but I could do all that, but God, I feel like God has burdened me with something very specific as well, right, alongside my spouse's burden, and I also have that kind of cause. So the person that that is multi-gifted, as a polymath in a sense, and that can use a lot of different things to accomplish the will, or someone who's like, no, I'm called as a practitioner, I'm called nonprofit leader, I'm called to be an artist, and has a more specific. What advice would you give to both of those types?
Yeah, I think, I would want to give advice to the spouse, to the husband, because something that I think has given me the freedom to be either one of those and is my brain went 3 different directions, but to the spouse, I would say the husband has to give the wife freedom to explore what it is that she's what God is putting on her heart, right? And I remember early in our marriage, I was like, I was taking pictures, and then someone was like, will you take my wedding pictures? And then you went out and bought me a camera so that I could do it well, right? And then it was like, well, let's sign up for classes so you can learn how to do this, and then let's do this. You know, you were about whatever it is that I was interested in, you were my number one supporter. And I think that's important. When finances were tight, that was important. Like nothing got in the way of that. So I think that was helpful. And when it came to working at the school, it was like, yes, we will rearrange. We will redo the chore chart. We're going to redo who's getting the kids up and doing this and doing that so that this can happen. So it was always I felt the support to where I could do counseling. That was a 3-year journey to get the master's, and that meant everybody's life was going to shift because I wasn't near as available as I had been, right? So that came with a ton of support from you. So that would be one thing I would say is like free your wife up to figure out what those things are, and then like champion it. Because most likely she's probably not going to try to champion it, because if anybody's like me, I'm thinking, well, that's not financially, that doesn't make sense. We can't afford that right now. We're already, whatever. So, but for the wife, I would say like keep exploring what you feel like you're called to and what you can. I think that's my thing is like chaos to order. And I'm sure other people are very different, but figuring out like where do you fit, and then keep trying things. Keep trying. Do not just become like, well, this is what I do, and kind of get into the routine of doing something that you're not really interested in. Keep trying, and be willing to lean on the body with your kids and things like that, so that they are a huge focus of my life, but they can't be my everything, because one, they're gonna leave. But two, I don't think that's what God intended.
Yeah.
So
I think that's really good. And by the way, just to give people encouragement, the average American changes their career, not job, their career every 3 or so years, and so I think oftentimes when we're trying to make those decisions, we're thinking like, we got to make this lifelong decision, and it has to be like, really it's got to be really, really, no, it's just like, hey, let's just live life, be adventurous, like just be sensitive to the spirit, and sometimes God is calling you to change, sometimes God is calling you to stay, and so I think that is, and that's an important thing. So what are some of the encouragement, or even some of the challenges that you would just say, like, when we get into these hard times, when is this like, I mean, again, like we were talking this morning, right? And just kind of the struggle of just doing like the busyness, and sometimes that can breed insecurities. Do I love ministry more than my marriage, or do I, and family, or man, you said you're going to discipline Nathaniel or Braden or whatever, or you're going to talk with so-and-so kid, but like, are you really going to talk to him, or is that just something that you're saying in the time, and so it's like, talk about some of the responsibilities, and some of even the tensions that we have, and like, how do you, managing through those.
Yeah, I think like you described, you were saying earlier, like September, October, November, and I wanted to say December, January, February. Like we keep saying, like that has been something in when life settles down in our life, like when life settles down, when we stop transitioning, that's not really the case. There are busier seasons, but it seems like there are just busy, life is just busy kind of consistently. And so I think what has worked well for us is when we have structures in place that we can fall back on. Afternoon walks, regular weekly date nights, those type of things, when they're in place, and like, okay, it's busy, but Monday's coming and we do have a date night. Okay. Like it's nice to have those things that you can depend on. Even when it's not, like what you were saying, like I'm too tired, I forgot to do that or whatever. Monday is still coming. So those staples, I think it's very important to have those staples. Like even if this week is so busy. We're still going to do our walks. We're still going to do our date night, and, you know, like having those staples in place.
And I think in doing that structure, I think it's really important, because oftentimes we will go into the mode of, well, I'm going to wait, and every time it's like 5:30, we're going to do our walk, right? And we'll say something like that. But I think it's important when you're establishing your structures, it's important for us to establish structures where at times that the family's getting the best hours of your day, right? And so it's sort of like, because I know, like for me, my first 3 hours when I wake up, those are the best hours of my day, because I'm a morning person. I'm excited. And it's just like a battery. I just kind of just go down and down. And then I survive on power naps. If I can take a power nap, then I can get back up, and then, you know, it's maybe not as full, but I get back up, and then it's just like, but after a nap or after, I think, and there's been times where I've intentionally have structured naps into my day before I was going to go back into family. And there's also times where I'm saying, no, I got to give the first fruit, like whether it's working out or whether it's, you know, us together, the walks or doing things together. I think it's important that the structure, all your structure also says you're important. We're prioritizing some of those things. And I think that is important as well, you know. So I think that's good. But let's talk about something that even on the flip side, and this is the side that oftentimes is not talked about, is, and you kind of mentioned, is that when the ministry is to be the primary, right? And again, I say that with primary, priority in a relative sense, but just like if you're a doctor and if you're currently doing surgery and it says your wife called, you're not gonna be like, all right, let me just stop because my wife is calling. You know, we understand that completely as a doctor in certain professions, but oftentimes in ministry, you know, it's kind of like priority. You just think that priority means you'll drop everything anytime, you know, your spouse calls or family needs you, but that's obviously not the case as well. So let's talk about when you're not the priority in the way that we're talking about it, not the primary, to do, like, talk about when it's appropriate to say, hey, like kind of the trough analogy, talk a little bit about that, and that Chip talked to us about. But when is it like saying, hey, this is not the appropriate time? Talk about that, tension and wrestle.
I don't know that we ever sat down and defined what those not appropriate times are. I know what they are, but I think that might have saved us some arguments had we done that. So maybe that would be some good advice, like having that honest conversation. Sunday mornings, don't bring anything up to your husband who's about to preach. Like, that makes sense, right? And then with that tension, like, there probably needs to be a time, because it does feel like Sundays are kind of that, like, you're going out of town situation where everything seems to happen Sunday morning. And I'm like, oh, I want to tell Dhati, but I can't, not right now. So knowing when that time is, you know, I know when you're out of town, when you're speaking at conferences and things like that, I'm just not going to call you, you know, like, I'll wait for you to call me. And defining those things, I think, are helpful, because then it's like, this is what we said we're going to do, as opposed to, oh, I'm forgotten, or I'm on my own, or whatever the, you know, the feeling is with that.
So I was gonna say, now, okay, we understand, and I think that's good. Like, clearly defined times, talk it out, work it through. You kind of know, you know, if whether whoever it is communicating. I know for you're constantly, like, whenever you're going in and it's about to speak to, you know, a client, you say, hey guys, I'm gonna be on a call for the next hour.
I put it on the family group chat. Client.
Yeah, client for the next hour. So do not bother me. And so everyone knows, don't bother mom during that time. What's interesting is that they never come to me during that hour. They just hold on to it until you're free.
I know, because as soon as the time is up, I get like 14 texts. I'm like, what is wrong with you guys?
Why? Yeah, but I kind of like that system. But but we recognize that side of it, that, you know, that we put boundaries, we put those guardrails, be able to communicate that, and the family kind of knows, or your spouse kind of knows. But what about the trough moments? Talk a little bit about kind of Chip's advice to us, and and then also just kind of when are those appropriate moments?
Yeah, well, I can't remember what we were bringing to Chip, but I loved his analogy as the response, and it has rung true several times, or like as we've thought about it since. But he was given what we call the trough analogy. Is were you a cow in the analogy? I guess.
I was whatever it was. I was the bad thing because
Well, no,
usually
we were both cows. Like whatever it was. Okay, so maybe the idea is Dhati's a cow who there's a trough of food and there's only limited amount of food, and the farmer puts the food out, and Dhati's posture, his generosity, his kindness, his sacrificial leadership is typically one where he's that cow that's like, you go ahead, and he lets all the people go into the trough and eat, or the cows, because people don't eat out of troughs. The cows go to the trough and eat before Dhati. But because Dhati and I are connected, and I'm mama cow, I guess, what you're saying when you're saying go ahead, and you're giving everybody else the best opportunities or the best food or the best whatever, best time, whatever, I'm also standing in the background, and I'm being called to sacrifice and to do the same, but I'm hungry. And maybe you've counted the cost and you said I'm hungry, but, or maybe you ate, but, or whatever it is, but I'm called to stand in the back. And so when you are sacrificing and allowing the other cows to go before you, you're also sacrificing for me and allowing the other cows to go before me. So Chip was challenging you in that situation to say, no, you need to make room and tell everybody, scoot over. My wife needs to eat. My cow wife needs to eat, and make space for me. And you still stay back if that's a choice that you make, but you make space for me so that I'm fed and I get the best of something at some point. And I think that was eye-opening for you, and you can speak to it. But I think it was eye-opening for both of us, because I was feeling like, wow, no one's really considering me. Like, I'm not considered in these, like, you are so sacrificial to other people. And you're like, well, I'm not being sacrificial to you, but if you're not eating, I'm also not going to eat, I'm not going to jump in there and be like, well, see you later, Dhati. And then you can speak to why that was.
I think it's an appropriate analogy, because it was eye-opening for me because of that. It was just like, yeah, I'm like, the first shall be last and the last shall be first kind of a mindset. And just like, so I'm constantly trying to take on that position, but also recognizing that I'm not just doing it on my behalf, but it's also on yours. And I think being able to say, all right, no, but you are like my priority as well. And so I also need to make sure that you are being, you need to be served. You need to be all of those things. And so like, for me, it was just like, all right, well, that put me in a conundrum in a sense of, in that realm. But like when we're doing ministry together, or where the different variety of different circumstances that we may have. Oopsies. Yeah, sorry. So whether we're doing it together, or the times when we're just struggling in that. So for me, I have learned, like, how can I, like, what are ways to prioritize? What are ways to come? So it's sort of like, for instance, I was at this conference this past weekend, and and it was an opportunity, networking, and I spoke at the conference and all that, but I know I've been gone, all of the things, and it was one of those things that, like, we've already determined as a family, like, you're going to go somewhere by yourself and all that. But I was just like, but we talked, and I was just like, no, I think I need to be there. And so I ended up changing my flight, doing all that, getting back home, because I wanted to be with you, and go to where we were going together, and just go as a family. And I think that was kind of what I would say is a trough kind of analogy. But I think there's so many other ways that I can be so much better and do that in so many different ways, because like you said, there's always something. right? There's always something ministry. There's always going to be need. There's always going to be things. And I know one of the things that I think we've done well at it, because early in our marriage, like if somebody called us at 8:30 or 9 p.m. at night, it was just like, well, my house, my boyfriend or my whatever kicked me out, and I don't got nowhere to go, or whatever it is. It's some major catastrophe. And we're just like, well, this didn't just happen today. This is not the first time. We're going to see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think that's important that's another trial and knowledge. Like, we can't just change everything because of something that you've been dealing with for so long. You're just now deciding to bring me in at the point of emergency. I can't just do this right this second. And so that's another one. Like Saturdays, there's many different church events that take place here at Blueprint Church on Saturdays. Like we do it often. And I just say, I can't come. I'm not going to come because I'm just not coming. So those are some of the things that
deemed Saturday
because we did deem Saturday as the Sabbath for us, for us to connect and for us to, to do what because it's like, 6 other days out of the week, there's so many forces vying for our attention. So we just say we're not doing these days. And so, yeah, I just think those are a lot of things that we have to wrestle with and struggle with together. So, yeah, I think there's so many things that we can be talking about. It's like we can go on and on about some of this, but I would just say one of the things, and we'll just kind of end with this. One of the things that I think is also important is we are constantly doing expectations, right? We probably do them at least once a year. But sometimes more in different seasons. One person gave us marital advice, and he says the best marriages is not just one marriage, but it's multiple. It's many marriages within. We're not talking about changing spouses. What we're talking about is managing the different seasons that are within marriage. And if you just think about, like, if you have school-age kids, there's the multiple different seasons that you have, whether they're in school or out of school, whether it's summertime or school time, variety of different vacations, things that you manage within. And so in each one of these seasons, not every single time, but at least a couple of seasons, we say, all right, what are your expectations? And I think that is something that is important to do, is to say, what are your expectations? And when you give your expectations, make sure that you say them in a kind of a pass-fail mindset, not like, I just want you to love God or I want you to love me. Like, that's not helpful because we don't really know what that is.
And somewhat granular.
So tangible, granular, right? Pass, fail, right? And just being able to say. And so after you write your expectations, I write my expectations, and then what do?
Yeah, we usually do 20 each, and then we exchange. And an example would be like, I need you, or I want you to, or I expect you to take out the trash, or take the trash things down to the corner every Thursday night before the trash people come. Very granular,
very specific.
Not just I expect you to help with the chores.
Or if I or another one would be, if I cook, that you clean.
Yeah, that is one of whoever
so
cooks
that is
doesn't do the dishes. Yeah. And so then we write those down, and then we exchange, and then we read the other person's. Usually they're somewhat comical, but if you agree to it, you write C for cinch. And that just means, I got it. Thanks for bringing that to my attention, but that's a good one. I can do that, and I will do that, and that's not a problem. If you agree to do it, but it's going to be hard work for you to manifest it, it's a S, which stands for sweat. Like, yes, I want to do that. I might forget. I'm going to be sweating as I do it. This is going to take work. And then the N is the nope, I'm not doing that. No way. And so then you exchange back and you read through it, and we go through each one and like, wait, you said this was a cinch, but it's not been happening, and that's been on my expectation list for the last 15 years. So let's call this a sweat and draw some more attention to it. And if it's a no, it's like, hey, talk to me about that. Like, how could we switch this up, or how else could I get my need met, or yeah.
So I think that is good. So doing those expectations, also doing check-ins, which we used to do in our talks. We haven't done as well. Our walks. I said our talks. Our walks. When we just talk about, like, where are you? And we talk about the emotions. That's another thing that we've done. And I would say the third thing that I would recommend is like we do planning. We plan out. Like, so we already know we're going to see 22 of DJ's games this year, 11 of Briaya's games, 11 of Jade's games. And like we planned out all of the like basketball seasons coming, and that's like November, December, January, February. And we already know all the games that we're going to, and we're putting them on the calendar. We know certain things.
As much as you can combat the tyranny of the urgent, the better. There's still going to be things that pop up, but.
So I think those are all good.
And another thing that we've done in the past, and we haven't done, I was saying about new seasons. We haven't done it this season. Is we used to do every Sunday night. We would do the same planning for the week, which is super helpful. Why are we not doing that? That might be the solution to all of our problems right there.
That could be the solution. So this is like actually very therapeutic for me. Like this.
But the reason why that one's good is because each week kind of holds its own reality. And so we said we were doing date night on Monday, but Monday something came up. And so then that's an opportunity to be like, oh, Monday is Dhati's team meeting with the coach. So we can't do date night. What other day can we move that to? And
we're getting date night.
We're going to do date night. Yeah. So Sunday night planning is super helpful.
And I think, let's stop there for a minute, because I've heard too many Christian couples, too many couples, period, talking about they don't do date night. And there's all the reasons why they don't do date night. Date your spouse. Like, let's just put an end to that phenomenon. Like, there is no reason why you ought not to be dating your spouse. I don't care if you don't have the money. I don't care if you have, like, prioritize that. Like, there's free dates, like, but date your spouse. I think that is
we used to do
so
a
critical.
$30 date and then a $10 date. That was the rotation.
Yep.
And so the $10 date was like we were going to Jenny's ice cream, or not Jenny's, Cold Stone Creamery and a Red Box.
Yeah, I remember all that. But we dated, and I think that's going to be important. One other thing that I think we do, and we're really going to go over here, is that we are always doing something initiative together. We just got finished doing 75 Hard, like, and that also just gives us these seasons where we're kind of working together to accomplish something. And you know, both of us being like achiever types, that has been helpul for us. So that may be something also that's something we don't oftentimes talk about, but we're always doing something. And so now we're kind of planning between now and the end into December to Christmas time. So it's like, all right, so we always kind of have something that we're trying to achieve together. So that may not be for everybody, because everybody may not be achievers like us, but
even if you're creative, you could do something. Well, I guess if
but spoken like an achiever.
That's true.
You know, but that's just how we think.
But I was thinking about cooking. You know, like it could be something that wasn't as
But I think some people, when they are trying to accomplish something, they actually get hives.
Oh, okay.
And they're just like, they don't, no, I can't. Like, so. Well, hopefully this was helpful. We talk about this balancing ministry, family, marriage, had a little bit of all of those things together. But yeah, we'd love to continue. If you think this is a good, like stuff like this is good, just put it in the chat, comment, let us know, because we can do more kind of just talk. This was helpful for me. Hopefully it was helpful for you. All right, thanks, Angie.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.